how do you find out the value, and does that matter to you? How much it is, kind of money-wise?
You know, I've been treasure hunting for a long time, and I found a lot of things. And these things, though I don't sell anything, I mean, I understand that they're valuable. So, you know, you have to be able to determine what these things are worth. There's a lot of ways to do that. Now, 10 years ago, it wasn't that easy, but today you can jump online and you can look at things that have sold that are similar in eBay and stuff like that. So you can get a pretty good idea what things are worth almost immediately. You can use the dollar amount of something like that to determine the rarity of something as well. You know, I've been detecting a long time. I have a huge collection of stuff that I've found. I probably, you know, I've never really added it up, but I'm sure I have at least $1 worth of relics, which, you know, is a lot of stuff. And I know it's I'm not going to say it's a burden, but in a way it is. And I have to be able to make sure that certain things go where they need to go. There's certain finds that I have that will go to museums.
And so, in terms of the kind of historical knowledge that you've got, you've obviously, you know, you've had the infantry training and stuff, and you read a lot. Have you got any, have you worked with any kind of academics on history, or do you read certain books, or have you been to university or done any courses on archaeology or history or anything like that, or is it all just you picked up along the way?
I've always considered myself a generalist, kind of like in everything I've done in life, and I found that it's served me very well. You know, as far as my education, you know, my formal education, you know, I have 2 undergraduate degrees, with, you know, 4-year degrees. I have one in biology because I love the outdoors. I have a degree in psychology because, you know, I love to, you know, figure out what makes people tick. You know, why do people do what they do? So in my undergraduate, that's noisy back here, Will.
That's a motorbike going past. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So, oh, I'm sorry. So you know, I have those 2 undergraduate degrees. But I also went on to get a master's in business administration because, you know, I understand that those degrees are nice, but I'm never going to make a lot of money in biology or psychology. You know, you have to, you know, keep going. So I got a business degree. Again, I'm a generalist. You know, I want to know a little bit about everything. So I got my MBA so I could set up a company, which is what I did. I set up a company, I grew it, and I sold it in 10 years and retired. So, man, it was perfect. It worked out great. So I've done the same thing with history. You know, I consider myself a generalist in history. Not only do I study about, you know, the Civil War, the Rev War, you know, the Indian days and stuff like that. When I was at college, I took archaeology courses. So I have a bunch of archaeology courses. I spent a whole summer on a dig up in the mountains, you know, learning how to do it properly, learning how to excavate and read the soil profiles and you know, figure out what the dirt is telling you, even without an artifact in hand. So I have a lot of very good, you know, field experience, and I've worked in the laboratory for archaeologists. I've actually been hired by archaeologists to use my metal detector on projects, and I found a lot of stuff for them, and really given them a better idea about how to use metal detectors, you know, to help archaeology move forward. So I have a lot of very good experience in that regard. But I also love to read. You know, I read a lot, and I like history. I read just almost strictly history now, and I read probably 2 books a week. Spend a couple hours every night before I go to sleep reading, and I just love to read. And I just finished, you know, a book on Patton. I like to read about World War II. I like to read about, you know, the Civil War and other military histories and exploration, and I like to read about treasures. I spend a lot of time doing that, and, you know, some of it sinks in. And again, being a generalist, you know, I can draw on these experiences from my past and put the things I'm reading today together and figure out stuff that, you know, the average person isn't figuring out. And that's one reason I think I've been so successful. Okay.
Yeah, good. So a couple more questions, it won't be too long. So can you, like, kind of, not in a list form, but in a kind of reasonably quickly, can you go through eras of history that you found things from?
I found a lot of things over the years. I found things that span just so much time. I love to look for anything. I mean, I look for fossils. I find a lot of Indian artifacts. I'm always looking, you know. It's not just what you're hearing, it's what you're seeing. The metal detector, I found, you know, just a wide range of things. I go to England almost every year, so I found Roman things in England. I found Celtic things. I found things right up to the present, you know, World War II, and you know, all through the different ages. Here in America, I mean, I very often find things from like our colonial period, you know, the early 1700s. I find stuff from, you know, the fur trade era. You know, we have Indian history here called the copper culture. The copper culture is like 8,000 years old. So I can go out and look for copper artifacts that are 8,000 years old here in America. I find just a ton of stuff like that, you know, right up to present. I like to look for modern stuff too. Find World War II stuff here in America too. I have tons of like artillery shells, you know, the solid kind, so they're safe. And I know there's more stories out there like that I can read about, and I know there's countless thousands of stories like that no one will ever read about. And that those relics are still in the river, sitting there, hopefully not sizzling anymore, but they're just sitting there. Okay?
Nice. Very good, very good.
You know, this is going to take like a month to upload and send to you.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it?
No, I'll say my video.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it will take a while. Cool, I think, like, that's, you know, so obviously I think we can talk for ages, cause, but I can't think of anything else to ask at the moment.
All right. Yeah, here's what, let's do this then. Okay, so you done, kind of?
Yeah.
Okay, let me turn off this camera so I don't have to...